on the Rubin Report.
And for the grace of God.
He is the devil incarnate. This is your son.
I don't memorize.
He literally looks like Uncle Leo from Seinfeld.
I am not male. I am a woman.
If I was to put my wang on this desk and then just, Mary, hello, I'm Mary. We got the Trump thing. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Rubin. I was asking the crew questions just at the last second there. I don't know if the audio came through. It is January 20th, 2026. This is the Rubin Report. We are live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, and local. Share, subscribe, tap that notification bell. It is January 20th, 2026. And you know what happened 1 year ago today? Do we have an image of it? That's what I was trying to clarify. I think we will have it in 1 second. Let me see if I can just keep talking without breathing until maybe Connor's able to get the image of. Yes, there we go. Donald Trump was sworn in to be the, well, for him, 45th and 47th president of the United States 1 year ago today. And I actually do think, as I've been laying out basically for the last year, that there are a lot of good things happening. It's to the backdrop of mostly what we have to cover, which is endless leftist craziness and a little wackiness on the right and everything else. But Trump really has been doing an incredibly good job. Maybe we can get more to that tomorrow. Today is just like, it's just a lot of craziness today. I'm just warning you, I'm not busting out a knife, though. I was told by someone at YouTube they would prefer if I didn't swing a giant butcher's knife on the program. We're going to talk a little bit about Kevin O'Leary smacking around Gavin Newsom. That's easy stuff. But the story that really is lighting up everything right now is disgraced CNN clown. I'm pretty sure that's what it used to say under his on his chyron there beneath him when he had a show. Don Lemon, he basically stormed a church in Minneapolis with a bunch of activists. He's pretending he kind of had nothing to do with it and was just being a journalist, but he may be in some seriously hot water. We'll get to a little bit of Kamala corruption as it pertained particularly to Josh Shapiro, who she probably should have chosen as VP, instead went with Tim Walz. And then just what is going to be an utter disaster in Virginia, where just yesterday, because it was the 20th, some states swear in people on the 1st. Mayors and governors, some states do it on the 20th of January. They just swore in their new governor and a few other people, attorney general, and it's going to be a nightmare. Also, I want to wish my good friend Bill Maher a happy 70th birthday. Bill, we've got a case of Copal on the way to Los Angeles for you. And are there any other housekeeping things that we should get to today? No, other than Joseph put electrolytes in my coffee today. I don't know that that's legal or has ever been done before. We're going to see what happens. But let's dive right in. Kevin O'Leary, you know him as Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank. He also is now on CNN all the time and all the news stories. Just making, like, he's a great investor, obviously, but I think really what his skill now has become culturally is explaining basic economic stuff to people on news channels who aren't particularly good at that. So he is able to communicate sort of economics 101, if you were a freshman in college, to people who should know way more about economics but don't seem to. Anyway, here he is talking about how Newsom's presidential run, which is obviously in the offing, he believes it will be crushed because as they expose the fraud in Minnesota, it's going to shift to California. And you may remember the clip we showed you yesterday of Dr. Oz saying, if you think what's going on in Minnesota is wacky, wait till we get to Cali. Take a look.
You know, this whole thing in Minnesota is lit up everybody's interest in accountability and transparency. And now Newsom, we know with certainty, he has presidential aspirations. Well, how's this going to work for him? All this tape you're making, Will, right now, that's coming at him in ads for him when he's running for president. Right now, people say he has no executional skills and he's a bad manager. And is there any evidence that that's not true? He's the guy that has to solve for that and show, look, this $37 billion wasn't wasted. Here's how I spent it. Otherwise, he's going to get cooked like a chicken on a spit on this one.
I think the most compelling ad you could possibly run, telling the story of California, is the number of U-Haul vans leaving the state versus the number of U-Haul vans heading into the state.
Yeah, that U-Haul thing, as you know, I've talked about it many times. It is true. When I left California just over 4 years ago, end of 21, we literally had to pay double. First off, we couldn't even use U-Haul because, well, I wasn't driving, but U-Haul wasn't even offering trucks at that point because so many people were leaving. But to bring our stuff, we ended up flying because we didn't want to take the dog all the way across, but doesn't matter. The company that we used basically had to charge us double because, as I've mentioned many times before, nobody was going back. What they would get east, basically to Florida. Some people would stop in Texas or Tennessee. They would mostly get to Florida, and then nobody was taking the trucks back to Cali. So that is true. But the broader point, and the point of the clip, is that O'Leary is pointing out to the fact that Gavin Newsom is going to be in major trouble. And that's why Trump just needs to keep going with this. They need, put aside the rioting and everything else in Minnesota for a second, which we're going to cover quite extensively. The fraud stuff coming out of Minnesota must be uncovered, and it is going to be, just going to be the tip of the iceberg. It really is, because Cali, which has been a one-party state in essence for decades, with this guy at the helm, which has just, you know, how much, I always ask you, how much was it the railroad that was going to go from LA to Sonoma? They wanted, it was going to cost $1.3 billion or $11 billion. We'll get the numbers on it. Everything they do is a giant slush fund. Every single thing that they do. So Gavin, it's not just that you're a lizard person. It's not just that you've enriched yourself while destroying the state. It's not just that you had dinner at the most expensive restaurant in Sonoma while you were locking people down. It's not all of the things that you've applauded. The fact that people like Elon and many others, now we know Peter Thiel just took his businesses out of Cali and everything else, and David Sachs and several others. It's not that you just applaud all of them while you lose your tax base, while you're telling everyone that they should be taxed more. You are going, keep going, Gav. That's what I would tell you. Just keep going with it. Let's see how it all works out. Now let's jump to Minnesota, where the mayor over there, this Jacob Frey guy, and you know, he is just the most ridiculously pandering buffoon he is not qualified to do anything. And yet he has become the mayor, and he's not even Somali, but he's become the lead. He is a Somali warlord running Minnesota. Here he is, and at least he has his talking points down.
We are not going to take the bait. We will not counter Donald Trump's chaos with our own brand of chaos here. We're not going to counter Donald Trump's chaos with our own brand of chaos here. Don't take the bait. We do not counter Donald Trump's chaos with our own brand of chaos.
Don't counter chaos with our own brand of chaos. Here's the problem, Mayor. This is the chaos. This is what it looks like, and we don't have to imagine it. We're watching their brand of chaos.
Okay, real quick, we just got some numbers on the Gavin, this train thing. So the train was basically supposed to go to LA, you know, up to Sonoma area. It was going to cost, they projected it was going to cost $128 billion to build railroads. Like, what is going on here? They've spent $15 billion, and all they've done is a train from Bakersfield to Merced. 126 miles for $15 billion. But okay, let's leave that there. To this clip, I mean, look, this Frey guy, I'm telling you guys, they are going to figure it out. The Democrats are working with these people on the streets. The fact that he knows they can turn it on, they can turn it off, as we discussed yesterday. ICE is just doing their job. And that's why ICE isn't running around like crazy people in, say, Florida or Texas or Montana or Tennessee. Because our law enforcement here, if they arrest somebody and they ask to see their license, for example, let's say you're speeding and you get pulled over, they ask to see your license. Well, if you don't have a license, let's say you're a citizen, but you just left your house without your license, you're going to be in some extra trouble, right? They're not going to deport you, but if they find an illegal and they say, where's your license? And you have no paperwork, you're going to be in trouble. Our local law enforcement in most red states, but Florida's by far the pinnacle of this, works with ICE to coordinate all of this stuff. So if the Florida state trooper, as you're going across Alligator Alley, picks you up, you're going to Alligator Alcatraz, and then you're on your way out, and they're going to coordinate all that with ICE. We do it perfectly seamlessly here. Some of the red states are doing something similar to that. In the blue states, you have decided to break the law. We talked about the supremacy clause yesterday, right? So the states are fighting with the federal government about something that the Constitution says is the federal government's duty, which is the border and immigration. So they're already breaking the law there. And then they are directing people like Frey and the ridiculous clown governor of the place, Tim Walz, are been directing their local law enforcement not to work with ICE. So there's multiple levels of criminality and everything else here. This is an interesting video. Nick Sortor, who he's kind of burning up on X right now. I guess you would call him a citizen journalist. He just gets out there and sees what's going on. He went to Minneapolis to record what was happening, and well, take a look.
They told me that I was the person that needed to leave, that I needed to get out of this area. I'm an American citizen, born and bred here, that is being told that I'm not allowed to be in an American city. And if that's not alarming to people, I don't know what could possibly be. I mean, the fact that the thing that I did that they didn't like was that I was there with a camera. I didn't get out of my vehicle. I was recording from inside the vehicle when I ended up getting robbed. But according to the police out there, you know, a felony robbery is not enough for them to go after the perpetrator. I'm the one that had to end up leaving the area. Thankfully, the FBI stepped in because we all know that Minneapolis PD and Mayor Fry aren't going to do anything to solve this robbery case.
You know, interestingly, he just doubled down on the point that I was making, but in a slightly different way, which is what I'm telling you is they're not working with ICE. So local, they've been told, Minneapolis police don't work with ICE. What he's basically saying is they're not even arresting the bad guys there. So if you get attacked while you're in your car and you just happen to be someone with a camera trying to, I don't know, drive by a fraudulent nursery school run by Somali warlords who are sending money back to Somalia that they've been given by the federal government, they're going to not do anything if you get attacked. So it's a complete collapse of the system, on top of the fact that they're just letting general mayhem and, you know, they can take over the streets and everything else. But what started all of this, what started all of the chaos, this sort of month-long chaos that we're now seeing in Minnesota and Minneapolis specifically, is that journalist, and he's actually a journalist without air quotes, Nick Shirley, this young kid, I've met him a couple times, went out there, how old is he? He's probably 25, he's 23 years old. This kid has done more journalistic work than CNN has done in probably 3 decades, maybe since the first Gulf War or something like that. He goes out and he just goes to these Somali daycare centers and finds out that there's nobody there, there's no kids there, something ain't right, and they're giant slush funds and blah, 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 blah. Then ICE starts coming in to figure out, well, who are the illegals here? All hell breaks loose. But what this really is about is so there's 2 things, right? So there's just like the fraud slush fund part of this, that it's largely in the Somali community of Minnesota specifically. They are stealing federal dollars, laundering them through these fake nursery schools, preschools, et cetera. And then there's the illegal immigration part of it. I thought this was quite good. It's only a 10-second clip, but Joe Lonsdale, who I've had on the show a couple times, who's co-founder of Palantir with Teal, used to work at PayPal with Elon. He makes a great point about how, well, just watch. Who gets upset when you shut off the fraud?
You know, Elon made a great point. I was involved as a kid at PayPal a little bit. Whenever you'd turn off fraud or grift or change something, the people who would scream the most were the fraudsters.
Yeah. Kind of basic stuff, right? You don't even have to relate this to Minnesota or immigration or anything else. But when you start looking at books, you know, and when people have been doing bad things, who's going to be upset? Is it going to be the business owner who thinks everything's on the up and up or who's doing things properly? Or is it going to be the accountant who kind of was fudging the numbers and doing bad things and maybe not carrying the 1 or moving a decimal point? So it's the fraudsters. Elon retweeted that little clip right there and wrote, and the fraudsters always have amazingly good fake sob stories. You know, this reminds me of a clip we showed you yesterday, a couple clips of, what's his name? The one Democrat who will talk to me, Ro Khanna. And Ro, you know, he basically was asked about the fraud and he's like, well, yeah, there's some fraud. And it's like, well, okay, how about look into that? But the entire Democrat machine is based on the fraud. So he can't really look at it because it is going to point to his own party. And as I said yesterday, it's not to say Republicans aren't part of this, but the entire Republican operation is not part of it, right? What did Donald Trump do? First thing, sworn into office 1 year ago today, he brings in Doge to uncover fraud, right? The Democrats would simply never do that. As a matter of fact, when he was uncovering the fraud and they started firing, you know, longtime government employees who basically were doing nothing or refused to respond to emails to say, what did you do for work this week? Which is certainly within the right of any employer to ask, even the government. The Democrats were all like, people are going to die. All hell's going to break loose, cats and dogs. Anyway, Donald Trump, he's on a tear right now, and here he is floating the idea that we might have to boot Miss Omar.
Think of that Ilhan Omar. She lives in Somalia. They don't have a government. They don't have a military. They don't have police. They don't have anything. All they have is murder and robbing ships, bringing in ships, pirates. That's stopped. Same missile, ping. That's the end of them. It's amazing how that can stop corruption. Those missiles, they never miss, you know. The same one, exactly the same one. But think of it, she comes from a country with nothing, and she comes here and she tells us about our Constitution. I have a constitutional right to rip off the country. I guess she's a total scam artist. Anybody knows.
He definitely has to work on his Ilhan Omar impression. That way he got British, right? I have a constitutional right to look at me knickers. Anyway, hopefully they all go down, right? Like Tim Walz, who's not even running for re-election because he's so caught up in this thing. All the money that went back to Somalia, do you think that has something to do with Somalian Ilhan Omar? The fact that she broke federal immigration law by marrying her brother, that the very place that they govern, even if you put all of that aside, that pretty much all hell is breaking loose right there and mobs are taking over the streets. We'll have more on that in just a second, but first, Noble Gold real quick. Guys, as you know, gold has officially gone mainstream. Every day, more and more Americans are discovering the power of gold. But how do you actually take advantage of it and invest in a simple way? That's where Noble Gold Investments comes in. Their specialists are trained to help investors like you go from confused to confident. Whether you're looking to roll over an old 401k into a gold IRA or want physical coins and bars delivered right to your home, Noble Gold makes the process simple, secure, and stress-free. You'll get step-by-step guidance, transparent pricing, and US-based service from a trusted team that's handled over $2.5 billion in precious metal transactions. With Noble Gold Investments, protecting and growing your wealth isn't just their job, it's their commitment. Visit DaveRubinGold.com today to claim your free wealth protection kit. That's DaveRubinGold.com. Noble Gold, helping you build a stronger future. That's what Noble Gold is doing in terms of who's destroying our current present situation. Let's look at Don Lemon. Here is Don Lemon outside of the St. Paul Church in Minneapolis. Now, the people that were praying at the St. Paul Church in Minneapolis on this Sunday were probably people all over the political map, probably all over the spiritual map and everything else. They were just Americans at church on a Sunday. Don Lemon, here he is, talking about how this mob was getting ready to get in there, an anti-ICE mob, and he's very excited.
Into Minneapolis a little bit ago and did some reconnaissance on the ground, speaking to an organization there that's gearing up to for resistance and protest.
Renee good! Renee good! Renee good! You drink your coffee, you got your jewelry, you have your nice clothes, but what do you do? What do you do to stand for your Somali and Latino community? Did Jesus profit off the words? No! Jesus would die within it. You do not touch me. Touch me again and see what happens. Hey, you can't. You are a fake Christian. Why are you not standing with your Somali and Latino communities? Why do I not see you out at Whipple every day protesting this attack on humanity? Where are you? You're sinners. You're pretending to be Christians, but we know you live an easy life, don't you?
All right, so that guy that was yelling there's a lot of videos of him going around. He is quite radical and seemingly mentally unstable. We'll see what happens with him. Now, it's interesting because Don Lemon went in with them. He went into the church with them. And that really makes you think, well, is he with them? Is he working with them? Is he an accessory for what they are doing? Or is he a journalist? Now, Don Lemon is not a journalist any more than I am a journalist. I always tell you, I am not a journalist. What I do is I read the news, chat about it with my guys. We write a show and I communicate the news to you. But I'm a guy that's sitting here at a desk. I am not out in the field. Now, he happens to be out in the field there. But what Don Lemon was known for all of his years was sitting at a desk being a paid propagandist. I'm telling you the truth to the best extent that I can. Lemon would say whatever the fuck they would. Damn it. I was really going to try not to curse all week. Lemon would say whatever they would just hand him on a piece of paper right in front of him. And people knew he was a fraud, and that's why he was fired from CNN. It's not much more complex than that. But you do have to wonder about somebody that is standing outside of a church and then happy to jump in the church and start questioning people and narrating the protest itself. Take a look.
This is the beginning of what's going to happen here. When you violate people's due process, when you pull people off the street, you start dragging them and hurting them and not abiding by the Constitution, when you start doing all of that, people get upset and angry. And if you remember what the Civil Rights Movement was about, the Civil Rights Movement was about these very kinds of protests. And for some reason, in our modern era, people think that in order to have protests, you got to be, cordoned off to a certain area and, what time you can protest. There's nothing in the Constitution that tells you what time you can protest. You can protest at any time. That's the whole point of it, is to disrupt.
Actually, Don Lemon, first off, it's disgusting that you as a black man, I don't care what color you are, but that you as a black man would compare this to the civil rights protests, because the civil rights protests were trying to ensure that black people would have equality under the law, which is guaranteed in the Constitution of the United States. It is not guaranteed in the Constitution of the United States that anyone can come to America and stay here as long as they want. But okay, you're a pandering buffoon. We'll move that aside. You're also a little confused because the First Amendment actually does not protect your right to protest in a church. Places of worship they basically get a special, what would you call it? There's a special sort of allowance that they have so that they are protected places. So if you want to protest outside of the church, you can. And I think we should actually start having conversations about that, because we know what the Hamas protesters are doing at temples in New York City. So there should be some conversation around that. But you aren't allowed to just burst into a church or a synagogue and start screaming and disrupting people. Places of worship have special protections. And by the way, Don Lemon, it's obviously absurdly easy to point out your hypocrisy, but let's just imagine that a bunch of Donald Trump supporters, people with red, do we have a red hat around here? Do we have a Donald Trump red hat? Imagine if, well, hot damn, imagine if a guy in a hat like this put on the hat like this and walked into a mosque and started complaining about Muslims. Would you think that that's constitutionally protected speech? Of course you wouldn't, you buffoon. Look at that, the hair barely moves despite all that. You have no idea how much product's in there. Here is Lemon, who then basically accosted the pastor himself.
This is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship.
So this is a house of God.
Which makes it everybody's house.
Yes, it is. But in a house, people don't yell at each other.
Yeah, but there's a lot of yelling in my house growing up. We still loved each other.
These people have come into our house and they've interrupted our worship. This is a house of peace, and we try to proclaim that. And this stirs division and rancor. And in the end, it's not helpful. Ultimately, I believe they've lost. They've emptied a house of worship. Everybody's gone home. Their point has been proven worthless. And so, in the end, I think they lose.
Don Lemon, you are the worst type of self-righteous, pretend decent progressive on the planet. Like, actually, how dare you? Putting aside the legal trouble you might be in, because as I pointed out, protesting inside a place of worship is not protected speech. But putting that aside for a second, who do you think you are? That on a Sunday you can walk into a church and demand these people, the pastor and the parishioners, that they have to answer your questions? You think put aside all of this, do you think any of the people that showed up at that church on that Sunday morning, do you think they showed up because they're evil people and they hate people and they want to kick people out of the country or anything else? I don't know. It's irrelevant what their political beliefs are. They were there to pray to God. And Don Lemon, might I remind you, as a flaming homosexual, which is what you are, you might be a little more appreciative that America is a Christian country, because Christians are by far the most tolerant people on the planet, and they are offering you a place to live. If you don't like it, you can go, but there aren't that many non-Christian places that would take you. Then he has the gall to stand outside as families start fleeing the mob. He starts narrating that.
Watch this guy here, look, he's hugging his kid. And, you know, I've imagined it's uncomfortable and traumatic for the people here, but again, careful, it's very slippery right here. Yeah. It's uncomfortable and traumatic for the people here, but that's what really, careful, please, really slippery, not kidding. That's what protesting is about. And so
it's uncomfortable for the people here. You don't even know what your protest, who, again, Lemon, who the hell do you think you are? And are you an activist or a journalist? You are not a journalist. You are riding shotgun alongside a bunch of paid agitators as they pick a random church. And a bit more on the First Amendment, because Lemon is going to be in some trouble here. The First Amendment protects churches through its Establishment Clause, which is no government religion, and Free Exercise Clause, right to practice freely, ensuring religious freedom, autonomy, and internal governance, like choosing clergy, and speech, meaning that a church does not have to let anyone in. I mean, think how profoundly absurd that would be if you took a church and said, okay, anyone can come in at any time and say whatever they want. It's not a church, then it's just a building, right? A synagogue should have to open its doors on Friday night services and allow Hamas members in. Would that make any sense? So there are certain protections of these things. I saw this on X from an account called Kangman, and I thought this is just right. It's an image, as you can see, of just the parishioners. Look at that father holding his child who's afraid, the young girl behind there. These people who there's just no doubt every single one of these people in this picture is far more decent than Don Lemon. And the quote there from this Kangman Lee account, this is one of the most radicalizing images as of late. And these people, you don't want to say these people should be radicalized, but what do you think you did right there, Don Lemon? And all of you people, that screaming bearded lunatic, demanding that Christians behave as he wishes them to behave, as if he has a Christian bone or kindness or decency in his body. It's completely absurd. And now listen to this from the Insider Wire. Breaking: Department of Justice to charge Don Lemon under the KKK Act for inciting a church raid. There is something ironic about again, Don Lemon happens to be black, a black man on MLK Day now being charged with the KKK Act. You can't make that up. We've had a bit more from this from Colin Rugg. New Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the DOJ, Harmeet Dillon, says Don Lemon is on notice after he suggested to his viewers it was their First Amendment right to storm churches. The statement comes after a group of far-left extremists stormed City's church in Minnesota. A house of worship is not a public forum for your protest. It is a space protected from exactly such acts by federal criminal and civil laws, Dillon said, responding to a post about Lemon. Nor does the First Amendment protect your pseudo-journalism of disrupting a prayer service. You are on notice. So we will see if Lemon gets in any trouble over this. I happen to, just by total coincidence, I spoke at an event in Hollywood, Florida on Saturday night, a little bit after Harmeet Dillon, and we spent about an hour together after. She is serious and legit. She is one of the best First Amendment lawyers in the entire country who's now working for the government, and we have her on the show. We're going to be taping it on Monday. It'll be up on Monday evening. But Lemon really might be in trouble. Thus, he's walking it back a bit. We will talk about that in just a second, but first, Venice AI. Sam Altman just announced that ChatGPT can now reference all your past conversations, every thought, question, idea you've ever shared. And with a former NSA director now on their board, Edward Snowden called it a willful, calculated betrayal of the rights of every person on Earth. We've seen this before. Alexa listens. Meta tracks everything you do. Why assume AI will be any different? And now OpenAI might even start asking for government IDs to use ChatGPT. That's where Venice.ai comes in. It gives you the power of AI without giving up your privacy. It's open source, private, and runs right in your browser. No spying, no censorship, no data collection. Your chats stay encrypted and stored only on your device. Go to Venice.ai/Dave and use code Dave for 20% off a pro plan. That's Venice.ai/Dave, code Dave. Real AI, real privacy. All right, so Lemon, not a journalist, an activist and a buffoon, broke the First Amendment, bragged about it. After he accosts the preacher, that he stands outside and he's narrating, he's doing play-by-play of children leaving a church, and he thinks he's a good guy. Just absolutely disgusting. Anyway, he obviously is getting a whole bunch of blowback on this thing, and here he is now saying it was just journalism. He's just a journalist doing journalism. Whenever you want to play video, it's journalism.
I had no affiliation to that organization. I didn't even know they were going to this church until we followed them there. We were there chronicling protests. Once the protest started in the church, we did an act of journalism, which was report on it, and talk to the people who were involved, which included the pastor, members of the church, and members of the organization. That's it. It's called journalism. So why don't you talk to the actual person who is in charge of the organization and whose idea it was to have the protests at the church before you start blaming me for stuff for which you have no idea.
I'm going to correct. He's just such a lying sack of shit. Look, you know exactly what you did. You went in with them intentionally. If you were just let's even pretend you were a journalist. If you were just a journalist and you were like, and you just happened to be wandering down the street and you're like, oh, there's a crazy leftist mob. There's a church over there. They're walking over there. Maybe what you would do is follow them with the camera. You wouldn't participate in it, which is exactly what you did because you were acting as a lawyer as you were grilling the pastor and then doing play-by-play as kids in tears are walking out of the church. So you are just an absolute liar, and Harmeet, get on it with this freak. But the problem is, again, every level of Minnesota, and New York is going to have a version of this with more on Zamboni, and Virginia is going to have a version of it, which we'll get to in a moment. These places will just not function anymore. They have destroyed their institutions. They have installed people who don't believe in law and order. They believe that you are allowed to do anything at any time. And if you believe that you are self-righteous and your cause is just, you can just destroy everybody else's pursuit of happiness and their businesses and ability to live and everything else. So here, let's go one more from Lemon now. This is him trying to explain that it's not his fault that he did this. It's Donald Trump that made him do it.
To me, it feels like an attack on the First Amendment and trying to, and this is just my assessment, you don't have to agree with this, Mr. Attorney General, but trying to tie me as a journalist to turn me into an activist, and I'm not. I was not there in activism at all. I was there just simply chronicling what they were doing, which is what journalists do all the time.
All right, so Don Lemon has been turned into this raving lunatic who shows up at churches and grills pastors because of Donald Trump. Okay, great. But to my broader point, that nothing works there, that you have the money laundering, you have criminality running all over the place, you have a complete inability. If you are just a guy who wants to go to work and live a normal life, you should be fearful that you're going to get a mob might grab you in the car. They might show up to your church. All of these things. So who's in charge of the legal system over there in Minnesota? Well, it's Attorney General Keith Ellison, who is a far left nutbag progressive. And here he explains that terrorizing a church is protected by the First Amendment.
Do with whether they're going to focus or investigate you. So I wish in a normal time I would say no. I say this is First Amendment activity. In time like this, it's just really difficult to say. Because the only one thing is clear. If Trump likes you, you can do no wrong. If he doesn't, he's going to use every weapon he can against you, including our criminal justice system.
Listen, I get it. He's a Democrat, so the worse you are in some sense, the more you raise up. But everything he said there was complete nonsense. What? So you're saying sometimes the First Amendment applies, but now because it's a little weird and Donald Trump, yeah, the protesters can do whatever the high hell they want. Again, if people showed up to your mosque, Keith Ellison, if a bunch of white people showed up to your mosque in the middle of the call for prayer or whatever else you guys are doing over there, I'm pretty sure you'd be throwing the book at them. So this is just completely absurd. Of course, Keith Ellison is a complete radical. Remember this? Remember this? This is from a couple of years ago. He wrote, "At Moon Palace Books, and I just found the book that strikes fear in the heart of Donald Trump." And it's an Antifa book. Yes, it's a pro-Antifa book. This is the Attorney General of Minnesota. It's Antifa, the anti-fascist handbook. So he is a supporter of Antifa, and he is also in charge of the entire legal apparatus of Minnesota. I would say good luck with that. Kevin Garnett. Who lives in Minnesota anymore? I was trying to think of someone that lives in Minnesota. Who else? They got a baseball team there anymore? Who's on the Twins these days? Is Kirby Puckett still alive? No, he died. Give me one other person out of Minnesota. Who lives in Minnesota? Who's on the Timberwolves now? Is there anyone? Anyone? Is there Kevin Love? No, the guy retired like 10 years ago. Is there? All right, is there anyone non-sport? Who lives in Minnesota? Well, St. Olaf, but Betty White's dead. Gerard Butler.
Bishop Barron.
Bishop Barron, great guy. They want me to go to Minnesota to talk with him, which I'd be happy to talk with him, but I got to go to Minnesota to do it. Like, can't we meet in neutral territory? All right, Gerard Butler. He's an actor. I can't think of anything that he was in, but apparently he lives in Minnesota. Here's an extremely ugly woman, Pramila Jayapal, and here she is running cover for the leftist mob.
The activists on the street right now, they feel a kind of helplessness, right? That's how you end up bullying your way into a church. And you've been in that chair. You've been the person who was the activist and felt like lawmakers weren't doing enough. Do you understand their frustration?
Of course.
What? Well, first off, I'm now being told that Kevin Love is still playing. I thought the guy retired 10 years ago. I barely watched the clip. I'm sure she just said some ridiculous. We did it in the run through. It's just stop, ladies. Forget that. All right, let's go back to, here's Lemon. He went on this Jennifer Welch show. This is some progressive podcaster who keeps popping up. She seems like a really lovely woman. And they talk about how the Christians that are angry at him now are just white supremacists, of course.
I think these MAGA men, they have like a hive mind. None of them are unique. None of them are the alphas they think they are. They just all take their orders every day. What's Elon saying? What's Trump saying? And they have to bend and mold.
There's a certain degree of entitlement. I think people who are, in the religious groups like that, it's not the type of Christianity that I practice, but I think that they're entitled, and that entitlement comes from a supremacy, a white supremacy. And they think that this country was built for them, that it is a Christian country, when actually we left England because we wanted religious freedom. It's religious freedom, but only if you're a Christian and only if you're a white male, pretty much. And my producers were saying, I said, how did I become the face of this? And my producer said, Don, you're a gay black man in America, and you have a platform, and you're the biggest name. Of course, you're going to be the person that they single out, and they're going to make the headline because it plays to their base. And their base is full of racist, bigoted homophobes like Nicki Minaj.
Okay. Don, no one cares that you're black. Nobody cares. Nobody. Is there some like racist out there, like genuine racist? Are there a few? There's some people, and they generally don't like blacks, and they don't like Jews, and they don't like others. Is that what this is really about? Or is this even about your sexuality? Does anyone care that you're gay? Nobody cares. You are a buffoon and a fraud and a huckster. You're a race huckster, and you're an activist pretending to be a journalist. And that your implication is that that Christian America is a white supremacist notion is so profoundly absurd. The founders, who were mostly white, they're basically all white, the founders then created the documents and created the conditions for America, which has just rolled into its 250th year, to open the door to everybody. And everybody of every walk of life and every color on earth still wants to come here to make a better life for themselves. You, Don Lemon, a man with marginal talent at best, who's a hack from another planet, have become a millionaire. That is the proof that this place is pretty good, because you have no skill other than your ability to be awful. And you've become a millionaire doing it. That's probably a lesson for some very unskilled children that are out there. If Don can do it, that's what if I can do it, anyone can do it. This is a little gratuitous, but why not? Here's Don about 6 months ago, you may remember this clip, trying to convince people on the street that just because you're illegal and you cross the border illegally, that you're not a criminal.
Okay, crossing the border illegally is not a crime?
No, it's not a criminal act. Okay. It's a misdemeanor.
So why are they being sent back and saying that they're breaking the law?
That's the point.
Okay, as somebody that actually...
We don't know if they're breaking the law because they won't tell. There's no due process.
So misdemeanor is not a crime?
It's not a criminal act, no. If you get charged with a misdemeanor, that's not a criminal act.
So why get charged at all then, if it's not a criminal act?
Because we have different levels of crime. Everything is not the same.
So it is crime.
No,
it's just
we have
different
different...
Is it a law to come over legally? Is there a law?
There are rules processes that you should follow. Yeah, so you're breaking rules. You're breaking the rules, but you're not necessarily breaking a law.
So what happens when you break the rules?
Then you suffer the consequences. But the consequences should not. Look, no one is saying no one should suffer the consequences. You guys are getting things mixed up.
I'm sorry if I have to talk about Lemon anymore. I'm not wearing shoes today. I'm gonna put my feet up and just relax because I can't with this guy. If you come into the country illegally, you're not breaking the law, you're breaking rules. Are we governed by rules? Can anyone pull up the rules document? Is there a rules thing that I don't know about? Is there just a set of rules, like it's a rule? If you step on the three-point line while you're shooting, that's gonna be a two-pointer. Do we have that kind of? No, we have something called laws, Don. And these laws were written by people who wanted a contiguous United States that would have a shape and have a border. And the people that were inside of this thing were going to be called Americans. And the people who were outside were non-Americans. And maybe they could come, but they would have to come legally. And inherent to the word legal is that you're going to do it properly. And if you don't do it properly, you're doing something illegal, which means non-legal. All right, no more lemon for today. When life gives you Don Lemon, you better take a Alexa, otherwise your head's going to explode. Alexa, is that a drug? I don't know. Let's talk about Prolon for a minute, and then we'll get to more corruption out of the Dems.
Feeling heavy or low on energy after the holidays? Prolon's 5-day fasting mimicking diet helps you reset your body and habits to start the new year strong. Good intentions fade without a plan. Prolon offers a simple, science-backed program that helps turn those intentions into action in just 5 days. It's a plant-based nutrition plan designed to nourish your body while keeping it in a fasting state, developed through decades of research with USC's Longevity Institute. Everything comes pre-packaged and labeled by day, so there's no guesswork. Research shows that completing 3 Prolon cycles can reduce biological age by an average of 2.5 years and waist size by about 1.5 inches. Right now, get 15% off Prolon's 5-day program at prolonlife.com/Dave. That's prolonlife.com/Dave for 15% off.
All right, so let's keep going with the corruption of the Democrats, because it really is now... We're almost at a point where it's becoming a national security threat. And I mean that actually, I try not to be that hyperbolic at this point, but because we know the Democrats can turn the violence off whenever they want, and they turn it on whenever they want, they use the activists and everything else. They just take over cities when they want. So all hell's breaking loose in Minnesota right now. We know that we've been through the BLM thing. We've been through all the COVID stuff. We've been through the Hamas protests. They can turn it on in New York whenever they want. They can turn it on LA whenever they want. And the more that we just kind of allow this lawlessness in the system, and you can just wander into a church and start harassing people on a Sunday. Yeah, okay, the more you just allow this, everything starts to get degraded, right? Our ability to communicate with each other and just have any norms as a society will not work. And the problem is they like to sell it to you that everything's grassroots. It's grassroots progressives bubbling up this way. And it's not. It's top-down corruption with these people. So I thought this was super interesting. This is from Red Wave Press. Kamala Harris's vetting team asked Governor Josh Shapiro, quote, "Have you ever been an agent of the Israeli government?" During VP vetting, the New York Times, in Mr. Shapiro's book, Where We Keep the Light, the governor is measured in describing his interactions with Ms. Harris herself. But Mr. Shapiro, who is Jewish, details a contentious vetting process in which Mrs. Harris's team focused intensely on his views on Israel, so much so that at one point he wrote he was asked if he had ever been an agent of the Israeli government. "Had I been a double agent for Israel," wrote Mr. Shapiro, describing his incredulous response to a last-minute question for the vetting team. He responded that the question was offensive, he wrote, and was told, "Well, we have to ask. Have you ever communicated with an undercover agent of Israel?" The questioner, Dana Remus, a former White House counsel, continued, according to Mr. Shapiro, who recounted, "If they were undercover," I responded, "how the hell would I know?" Mr. Shapiro wrote that he understood that Mrs. Remus was just doing her job, but the fact that she asked such questions, he wrote, said a lot about some of the people around the VP. All right, so first off, I'm going to take a slightly different tack than the obvious one on this, which is that Josh Shapiro, you are not a complete lunatic like the rest of the Dems. You are a lefty. I'm not particularly impressed with you, but I actually think you're somewhat of a relative decent guy running a very purple state of Pennsylvania. Perhaps you wanted to mention some of this stuff when they passed you over, but I know that your hatred, I suppose, of Trump overrode the deep bigoted corruption of the lady that wanted to be president and did not choose you. And we damn well know that they did not choose him because, at least largely because, he is Jewish. As simple as that. That's where the Democrat Party is at. Not controversial or anything else. Is what it is. And you can, particularly if you're Jewish, you have to just decide what that means to you, I suppose. Here's a bit more from the New York Times. He, meaning Shapiro, was pressed on other questions about Israel, he wrote. "I wondered whether these questions were being posed just to me, the only Jewish guy in the running, or if everyone who had not held a federal office was being grilled about Israel in the same way," wrote Mr. Shapiro, an outspoken critic of what he saw as anti-Semitism on college campuses amid the Israel-Hamas war. So Again, this goes to the radical nature of the party. Tim Walz, who I think wasn't he in, or at least claimed to be in China during Tiananmen Square? It turns out he wasn't, but he claimed he was there. Did they grill him about his connections with China? But you guys get what's going on here. And at the end of the day, they did choose Tim Walz, who was an utterly embarrassing candidate and a man who's now wrapped up in a scandal that's so bad he won't even run for re-election in his state. Here is Nick Shirley, the very same 23-year-old kid who did more journalism than CNN's done in decades, talking about why Kamala chose Tim Walz.
You know what's interesting about Tim Walz? Why do you think Kamala Harris chose Tim Walz? Nobody knew who he was before.
Why? That is interesting.
The first day he's chosen, he raises the most amount of money than any other candidate in history. I think it's over $35 million he raised for the campaign within just a day of being selected to become the vice president. And now we know all this fraud's happening. How did Tim Walz, he used to be a high school football coach, he's not even from Minnesota, he's from Nebraska. How was he able to raise the most amount of money?
That's great. Do you think the Somalians were funding it?
100%. It had to be some sort of fraud.
All right, so to be clear, yes, we just checked. He claimed he was at Tiananmen Square. Turns out he wasn't. He just misspoke, because that's the type of thing you would misspeak about. I was in New York City during 9/11. Oh, well, it didn't work out for them, obviously, but you can see why. So she passed over on Shapiro, who, again, he was, to whatever extent there is such thing as a moderate Dem at this point, he is a moderate Dem. Now I would hope that they still would have lost, and Trump would still be president, but that might have been a slightly different tack than going all in on the leftist lunacy. They choose Tim Walz. Clearly it had something to do with his ability to fundraise, which maybe had something to do with his ability to money launder. And even though Kamala did not become president, don't cry for her, because look at this. She just moved into a new $8 million mansion in Malibu, so she can be there with her concentric circles and her Venn diagrams and all of her stuff, and it's just great. So, okay, so what else is happening with the Democrat Party? Well, I mentioned today is the 20th, so we are now swearing in the last group of people that were elected back in November. Some states do it on the 1st, some do it a couple weeks into January. And over in Virginia, which should be red but is mostly purple and now turning blue, which is just insane. And it's largely turning blue because it's so close, obviously, to DC. So all of the bureaucrats, the deep state government people that are in perpetual government that want the slush fund to go on, many of them live in Virginia. Here is new Virginia Lieutenant Governor Ghazala Hashmi being sworn in on a Quran.
Are you prepared to take the oath of office?
Yes, I am.
Please place your left hand on the Quran, raise your right hand, and repeat after me.
You know, we talked about this a couple weeks ago when Zorhan Mamdani swore on the Quran. You know, most politicians swear in on the Old Testament. I assume some swear in on the New Testament, and clearly this country, I mean, I don't need to give you a history lesson or a philosophy lesson in some sense, but this country was built on Judeo-Christian values. Everyone knows this, and the Old Testament and the New Testament were the bedrock to build a society that was based on the individual. The Quran and Islam means to submit. That is very different than individual rights. So that she is, by the very nature of swearing on the Quran, she is swearing on something that is actually antithetical to American values and American freedoms. I wonder, you know, there's a million videos like this. We just grabbed one, but it's like, I wonder, would she now she's in Virginia, but would she have anything to say about this imam in Texas?
So know this, that Islam will enter every house. Every house. Don't worry about the Islamophobes. They can yap all they want. Their children will be Muslim.
Your children are going to be Muslim? I did not know that. You see, that's a fundamental difference, by the way, between Judaism and Christianity and Islam. Islam is there to convert everybody. Now, Judaism is a religion that does not proselytize, right? So if you want to become a Jew, Jews don't run around trying to convert people. If you want to become a true Jew, it is an extremely arduous process. They want to know you're seriously serious about getting in on this thing. Christianity is a proselytizing religion, except in modern times, certainly the last couple hundred years, Christians aren't running around killing people, murdering people, subjugating people in the name of Christianity. They are simply not doing that. As I said before, Don Lemon better thank his heels that he lives in a Christian nation as a gay black man, which nobody cares that he's gay and nobody cares that he's black. It is because it's a Christian nation. So having more politicians swearing in on the Quran is not good, but that's one thing. They also had this guy swear in as the Attorney General of Virginia. That's Jay Jones, a man who had texted, you may remember the scandal around him, texted to a friend of his during the campaign, Republicans and their children should be brutally murdered. So between Quran lady and the murder attorney general, I don't think things are going well there, but that pales in comparison to their new governor. They have this lady, Abigail Spanberger, and she is going to fight Donald Trump and his deportations.
And in Virginia, our hard-working, law-abiding immigrant neighbors will know that when we say that we will focus on the security and safety of all of our neighbors, we mean them too.
Why do we live in a country with so many morons? How did it happen? How did it happen? Lady, your law-abiding immigrant neighbors, okay, fine. But what you always do is you don't say it's the illegals that they're going after. They're not going after your law-abiding neighbors because inherently your law-abiding neighbors are legal. They're going after illegal people. Now, Abigail, maybe you watch that Don Lemon thing and you're confused. You think they just broke a rule, not a law, but it is a law not to come into the United States illegally. Then, of course, what did this lady do? Well, her first action once sworn in was to repeal an executive order that mandated that the state work with ICE.
And this executive order rescinds executive order number 47. State and local law enforcement should not be required to divert their limited resources to enforce federal civil immigration laws. It is a responsibility of federal law enforcement. Virginia state and local law enforcement officers must be able to focus on their core responsibilities, investigating crime and community policing.
I'm gonna give you a little nuance here. And a little nuance is that as the governor, I think there's probably a legal argument to make that you can say our local law enforcement will not work with ICE. That's a little different than saying we will not allow ICE here. If you were to say we will not allow ICE here, that absolutely, we've talked about this already, that absolutely is a violation of federal law. Will anything happen of it? I'm not so sure. Would it be better if they did things like we do here in some of the states, obviously in Florida and some of the states I mentioned earlier, and say, hey, we're going to have our local law enforcement work? Like, imagine if you were, if you were a police officer, you're a highway patrolman or whatever else, and you're in Virginia, and some guy is drunk and speeding down the highway, and you pull him over, and he doesn't have any documentation or anything. As a law enforcement officer, she is saying, we will not work with ICE. So what are you supposed, does that make you feel good as a law enforcement officer? Most people that go into policing, that go into any kind of law enforcement, it's because they want to enforce the law. They want to keep things safe for people. So you're asking these people to be less than their best selves. And I suppose things will only get worse under her. And it's a real damn shame because it shouldn't be that way in Virginia. It certainly shouldn't be. But this has been a bit of a, I would say, messingly depressive show in some sense, although I thought I was quite hilarious at times, because the Democrats are destroying a lot of stuff and they're doing it real quick. And we can only pray and hope that Donald Trump and Marco Rubio and Pam Bondi and Harmeet Dillon and everybody else is ready to fight this with every bit of power they have. And they better do it quick. And not only that, but they better win the narrative war, because otherwise we end up in a midterm where the Republicans lose, Trump ends up getting impeached or hung up impeachments. He's a lame duck and it's over. They bring in Gavin and we're screwed. Jesus, this is depressing. How do we get out of it? Well, Thomas Sowell, who is still alive, God bless him. This is a video from probably 30 years ago, but he explains a bit about immigration. Perhaps we could get this to some Democrats and that would turn them around.
If we're a land that in God we trust, and Jesus says, let the children come to me, wouldn't you agree that we need to open our arms to Mexico?
No,
because every country has to protect its own borders. There was a time when virtually every country in the Western Hemisphere not only allowed but encouraged immigration on a massive scale because they had the land and they needed the resources and so on. It's not at all clear that if you were to throw the borders wide open, let anyone come who wants to, that this would still be the same country 50 years from now. And so, in a sense, you can't let everybody come to America, because if everybody came to America, it wouldn't be America anymore. So that's not an option that we have.
And in some sense, I think if our founders were alive right now, they would say, what is this place 250 years later? They'd be, I suppose, marveled by technology and televisions and phones and radio and lights, electricity. Like, that would be pretty cool to them. But I think that they would look at us and say, boy, what really did happen here? Why did they forget all of the things that were obvious to us in terms of why we founded the country in the first place? You let everyone into America. America's no longer America. Simple as that. That's what Sowell said. It's obvious. It's real. And the question is, for any country, when you're letting people in, it has to benefit you in a way too, right? Otherwise it's the giving tree, and then there's no tree at the end. Read a children's book, right? And that's not what we're here to do. We're here to be something that's everlasting, so that I made a tree reference, but so that you can build roots here and grow something great, hopefully with a family and a community and everything else. And that's what a bottom-up view of the world actually does. But the question is, as we stand in 2026 right now, is do we need the resources of other people? Now, there might be some arguments that, yeah, maybe we need some really incredible high-tech coders right now. We need more of them in America. Perhaps. A lot of them could work from other countries for American companies, but you can maybe make some argument around that. But it's getting harder and harder. For all the years that it was more on the Republican libertarian side, we talked about this yesterday, that they were like, let all these Hispanics in, we need them to do all these jobs that no one else will do. It was largely agricultural jobs. It was largely building houses and things like that. We are on the verge of a technological evolution that is going to make the world so different in 5, 10, 15 years that it's going to blow people's mind. You know, the difference between 2 years before the TV and then after the TV, how it fundamentally changed things in America. It wasn't just that you were watching things all at the same time and you went from just listening with radio to watching, but then TV dinners came that it literally changed the American diet, which then led to obesity and everything else. Well, we're about to go from having all of these people, millions and millions of people that were picking things in the field so that we could have fresh produce, and robots are already doing it. The low-level entry jobs that the Democrats keep telling you should be $15 an hour and $20 an hour and $25 an hour are already being outsourced by iPads at Burger King. So the shift has already occurred, and the question is, will we do anything to triage the damage that's been done, or will we just open the floodgates, allow anyone in, not have any rules anywhere, and destroy the whole system? Thanks for watching. Post-game show. We're going to try to do it the other way. I promise. Post-game show, 30 seconds. RubinReport.locals.com. Ciao.